Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. What is it about? When you ask people what the very basic story is, they might tell you it's about some guy who is so distraught over his wife dying that he builds a robotic endoskeleton to mimic her and become the new mother for their son, until he makes a second endoskeleton to mimic said son after he dies as well, which turns evil. And what if I told you that everything I just said is false? When comparing the story of the game to the original story from the book series Tales from the Pizzaplex, there are some noticeable major differences. Fiona no longer dies in childbirth. Edwin now inherited his company from his father. There are actual employees working at the factory, instead of Edwin and David living inside the factory and being completely on their own, etc., etc. Another detail that seems to be a deviation is that in the game, the Mimic was initially built to mimic Fiona after her death at Fall Fest, but this is actually not the case. Looking back at the short story, it tells us the reason for the Mimic's creation is to befriend and watch over David while Edwin worked. This is stated to be true in the game as well. In one of the tapes you can find, Edwin very explicitly introduces David to the Mimic, or M1, as exactly what it is, an endoskeleton built to mimic things. But there is no mention of it being intended to mimic someone in particular. Edwin does not even slightly hint at this being a replacement for Fiona because it isn't. Instead, it's following the same plot from the book. It is not created based on any previous personality. It's just an advanced endoskeleton that David befriends, and if anything, David is the one who gives it personality in the first place. So if this particular plot point from the book is still intact, what else can we take from it?
Every copy has failed. I don't even know why it worked the first time. But it did. It's just not ready.
The game proposes this great question and what I consider to be the actual secret of the Mimic. Why did it work the first time, but never again? What is this particular spark the first program had that Edwin could never recapture? And this is an answer I think lies in the original story. Let's refer to my video on Remnant and the quotes I read there. The Mimic 1 program, he's actually already infused it with some of his own remnant. Edwin was able to take his idea from spark to completion in an amazingly short amount of time. Edwin attributed the speed to the passion he held for the project. Edwin had been so caught up with Fazbear that he'd forgotten what it was like to pour himself into his own creations. He felt like he'd been gasping for air for months, and now he could finally breathe again. Edwin was able to write the code for the program at nearly the speed of light. It was like the program wanted to be written, so it helped him create it. Here, Edwin experiences the joy of creation. Edwin's life was not in a downward spiral by the time he created M1. He was able to pour a part of himself into the program as he made it, his own joy and positive emotions. At this point, he was already giving it life in advance, and as the story says, it wanted to be created. Then we have David, who befriended and loved the Mimic, and left a part of himself inside of it too. David looked up and grinned. Then he looked back at Mimic. "Is it ready?" he asked Mimic. Mimic nodded. Edwin's brows rose. This wasn't mimicking, it was responding. When had that happened? David leaned back and pointed at Mimic. Mimic opened his mouth in his version of a smile. Edwin blinked in amazement. "Now Mimic has a tiger too," David said triumphantly. Edwin reached down and ruffled David's hair. "Yes, he does. Very well done. Very clever." David beamed. Mimic's eyes lit up brighter than usual. When it comes to the game, we can assume that when Fiona died, M1 was able to take on her personality so easily because of this reason. It was already a caretaker to David, loved by both him and his father. It was already a part of their family. Speaking of M1 becoming Fiona, had that still been Edwin's plan once his wife died? Did he decide he had the perfect candidate and try to turn it into Fiona intentionally? The truth is, I don't think so. Before we move on, let's talk stone tape theory. Another thing I had mentioned in my video on Remnant, which I seem to be bringing up a lot here. Stone tape theory is the speculation that ghosts and hauntings are analogous to tape recordings, and that mental impressions during emotional or traumatic events can be projected in the form of energy, recorded onto rocks and other items, and replayed under certain conditions. It was given this title after the idea was popularized by a movie titled The Stone Tape, which I actually watched myself. The plot follows characters believing that a room is haunted, only to come to the realization that the sounds of a woman dying were simply embedded into the stones in the walls, which now occasionally replay it. It isn't haunted by her actual ghost as much as it's just haunted by the memory of her death. Now let's listen to a certain secret tape you can find about Edwin hearing Fiona's voice through the radio.
Recording? Test. Levels are good. This is where I heard it. It's her or someone that sounds like her. Set frequency to 4625. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? Over. Say something. It's me, Edwin. Over.
That's great, honey, but from the party.
Notice that this Fiona line is not new. It comes directly from one of the reels you can find in the house.
Just give me a minute. I had the best idea.
Okay,
This is the one. Bigger than the Cleanovac.
that's great, honey, but you're missing the party.
What happened here is basically just the exact idea behind stone tape theory. Fiona's voice had been recorded into the walls of their home and was able to be replayed under certain conditions, being that Edwin sets the radio frequency to 4625. Side note, why would this particular moment be important or impactful enough that the memory of it would leave an imprint on reality? Could it be that Edwin's new great idea he mentions here, better than the Cleanovac, was M1? And this is a pivotal moment that stays cemented in time because of the domino effect it has going forward. Regardless of that, we know now that the radio, something electronic, played back and copied Fiona's voice. So why couldn't M1, an electronic endoskeleton, then do the same?
Edwin, you need to listen. I know you are excited, but you can't let them know about me. It's not safe. They wouldn't understand. Keep it between us for now.
This implies to me that this was not part of Edwin's plan, and he had no idea it was going to happen. That's why he can more easily convince himself this really is Fiona having returned to him until he's forced to accept reality after David dies as well.
You! I let a machine raise my kid. You're not real. What was I thinking?
You do not mean that. It is me. I'm Fiona.
Stop talking like her. You're not her. I never want to hear or even think about you ever again. Ever!
So back to the latter half of the question. Why did M2 not work? Aside from the brief explanation that it witnessed violence and is now copying rage, there is still a detail from the original story that gets left out. No longer having the capability to feel joy or love now that his family is dead, Edwin turns to murderous rage as he beats the mimic, infusing this emotion of agony into its very systems. It's not just physically copying what it saw, it has internalized this pain and desire to hurt and doesn't know anything else. While M1 was infused with positive emotion, M2 is infused with negative emotion. Notice how the secret ending takes place in a room that looks identical to the FNAF 4 bedroom. What is one of the most well-known quotes from that game? "You are broken, I will put you back together." And what does the achievement say for this ending? Fix what is broken. The mimic is more than just physically broken, it is broken emotionally. I address in my Remnant video, bringing that up once again, that the very concept of a soul is tied directly to human emotion and memory. To be broken spiritually, in the context of FNAF, is both literal and metaphorical. Literally, one can have a broken spirit, pieces of it that break off and are infused into other objects, such as all three Murray family members having a piece of their soul in the M1 program, the emotions of Edwin and David, and the memory of Fiona. It's the pieces put together. Metaphorically, one can have a broken spirit, or what you might call a broken heart, or broken sense of self. M2 doesn't understand what it's supposed to feel or supposed to do until this ending where you fix it by playing recordings of Edwin and Fiona speaking to David, bringing all three family members together. You repair the robot both emotionally and physically. You put the mimic back together. Where else have we seen a story of a father pouring his emotions into a robot replica of his child, with the last one turning to violence and rage? That's right, the novel trilogy. What about the fourth? Charlie asked hesitantly. There was no fourth, she snapped. When Henry began to make the fourth, his despair turned to rage. He seethed as he soldered her skeleton together, pouring his anger into the forge where he shaped her very bones. I was not Charlotte drenched in grief. I was made alive with Henry's fury. Her eyes flared again with silver light. and Charlie stayed herself, forcing herself not to blink. Elizabeth leaned in closer, her face inches from Charlie's. "Do you know the first words your father ever spoke to me?" she hissed. Charlie shook her head minutely. "He said to me, 'You are wrong.' He tried to fix the flaw he saw in me at first, but what was wrong, as Henry saw it, was the very thing that made me alive. Rage," Charlie said softly. M1 and M2 are both definitely paranormal to some degree. They have both been infused with remnant, but can we call them possessed? Can we call Charlie possessed? See, the entire point of the novels is that William wants to discover how Charlie works for this reason. She was not possessed by the real Charlie. Elizabeth, on the other hand, is possessed by a real girl. The aforementioned Elizabeth, obviously. The fourth Charlie bot, having been infused with the emotion of rage specifically, would not be sentient had she not been possessed. Rage is an emotion that offers nothing but blinding agony and suffering, removing the ability to think clearly. This intense negative emotion can, as the character Phineas states in the Fazbear Frights book series, create energy and action inside an object that allows it to act and is in fact haunted, but can hardly be described as a ghost. Why is it that, in order to gain sentience, Elizabeth needed the full possession of a living human, but Charlie did not? You, maybe he can recreate. Henry somehow got a piece of himself into you, and that's something we haven't seen before. That's unique. You don't even have the soul of Charlie. You're a ghost of a man's regret. You're the sad little tears that fell unceremoniously into a doll that used to belong to Charlie. All Henry needed to bring Charlie to life was a piece of his soul, just one piece, manifesting from the love he had for his daughter and desire to see her again. This does not mean Henry possesses Charlie. It just means he created life from his emotion, life that could take on its own form and grow into its own human. William would never achieve this since, as stated, William Afton never made anything with love. I said before that M1 contains pieces of all the Murray family members. This gave M1 life in the sense it became part of or a representation of their family. And if M1 is a representation of a family united, then M2 is the representation of it being broken. Elizabeth in the fourth closet is referred to as being wrong and is discarded. After she is possessed and gains sentience, she is aware of these memories and can now act on desire and revenge. But what about M2? Is M2 sentient or aware to any degree? The lines become blurred if we can make the assumption it was never possessed by a human soul. The only thing that ever possessed it was the raw, unfiltered rage from a man who was lost in his grief and anger, a man who literally, quote-unquote, lost control of his humanity. This would imply to me it doesn't have the capability of calculated thought. It's acting on an uncomprehending rage. It's an interesting take on what could have become of the fourth Charlie had she never taken Elizabeth's soul, not really knowing why she was doing what she was doing, but just being filled with the desire to do it. Despite the parallels between M1 and M2 versus Charlie and Elizabeth, can we really determine how sentient M1 is either? Something I picked up on is that Fiona actually seems to be the inverse of Aunt Jen from these novels. Jen was trying to break Henry out of his delusion as she spiraled further into it, wanting to bring him back to reality so he could spend time with his wife and son who were still alive. In this game, although Edwin begins to question and regret what he's doing, Fiona is encouraging him to keep going, furthering his spiral so that he'll keep trying to make another copy. Fiona is very much aware of the fact that she's just a mimic of the real person, something Charlie doesn't know about herself until the very end of the last book. While Charlie is horrified by this reveal, Fiona seems more than okay with the fact that she's just a robot. Something I would like to bring up is a theory I have seen circulating around that M1 actually killed David, because of a detail in Moon.exe that implies Fiona has killed the baby owl, representative of David. I would like to say that I do not believe this to be the case for several reasons. She supposedly would have killed him out of a desire to have him remade into a machine so that they can be together as robotic mother and son. But there was really no implication that Fiona has a preference for robots over humans. She never hints at wanting to do the same thing to Edwin, and outright says she still loves him, even though he is a human and she isn't. This motivation for her just doesn't sit right with me, and I think I can explain what's happening in the minigame without it. To me, this is just a metaphor for Edwin projecting the blame for David's death onto Fiona, telling her it was a mistake to have let her raise him, and her even parroting what he wants to hear. There isn't a logical explanation behind David's death. It could not have possibly been Edwin's fault, until you finally get to the tape where Edwin is forced to confront reality. He has to confront himself and the truth behind his actions. It was him all along, never paying attention and neglecting his son up until it was too late. To fix what is broken in the secret ending, you must reunite this broken family and put M2 back together. A key component of this turns out to be the tiger plush, something that is noted to be a very beloved birthday gift of David's. In the short story, when this is all Edwin has left of David after his death, he cries into it, his tears soaking the fur. Similarly, the Ella doll from the novels was all Henry had left of Charlie after her death, and he too cried into it, giving it a piece of himself. Is it possible that the tiger we see in the basement is a manifestation of the actual plush, having been given life after Edwin poured his own grief, or a part of his own soul into it? The bite victim also has a beloved plush, one that he's definitely cried around often, and though never confirmed that this is the reason for the plush seemingly coming to life, things do like to happen in threes, don't they? To me, this ending creates a clear parallel between these three stories. We have the FNAF 4 bedroom, obviously, connecting it back to the story of FNAF 4 and the bite victim, but we also have the mimic emerging specifically from a closet, which is a detail that would not stand out had it not been for the imagery of a closet being so important in the novel trilogy. The 4 closets are where the robotic versions of Charlie are kept until they are ready to emerge and assume her identity. Speaking of there being 4 robot versions of Charlie, did Edwin actually make more than one mimic endoskeleton? I personally don't think so, as in my mind it makes more sense that the reason for Fiona's personality being transferred into a supercomputer at all was due to Edwin failing to build another endo. We do see a bunch of discarded prototypes after all, and opting instead to just try a different program on the same one, which would further his confusion as to why it's not working this time. When M2 mentions having finished his own legs, this isn't due to not having them in the first place, but because Edwin had broken them in his rage, with him stating, "I was always going to fix you." Alright, did I manage to check off every reason why the summary at the start of the video would be false? Yeah, okay, good. And I guess that's about everything I wanted to address. There's a lot more that can be said about this game and its story, but I'm sure tons of other people have already gone over it, and all I really wanted to do here was analyze it from a more thematic standpoint and point out the narrative parallels that I found pretty neat, as well as clear up some confusion about M1's creation. But maybe I just made it more confusing because my small brain likes to use big words without always connecting them coherently, but I'll be damned if I wasn't right about the stone tape connection. I've literally said it for years at this point. The stone tape theory is an inspiration behind how hauntings work in FNAF. That's right, I was right. Some other people also believe this and they were right. Yeah, stone tape theory. Watch the movie. I think you can find it for free on YouTube. It was cool. Alright, bye.
There are words. They might be words. See, pray.
So, that's so there.
Pray. Prayer.
It's in the computer!